everyone. I'm here with Ryan Yates, the president and CEO of Apaylo Finance. So today we're just going to go through a couple questions. Okay, so first one, there are a lot of changes in the payment space from non-bank participants, well-respected national banks, and traditional banks. What is the single biggest change that is happening in your opinion, and why? And what are the implications?
Sure. I would say the biggest change that's happening in the industry right now is all the new retail payment oversight framework. So more recently, the Bank of Canada announced that they would become the regulator for basically payments. And that would serve both MSBs, so lending companies or foreign exchange companies, as well as any payment service providers. So with that new regulation, I think it'll bring a lot of change to the industry and probably bring a lot more oversight to companies like Apaylo. But yeah, that's probably the biggest change that's happening right now in Canada, is that new oversight framework.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. How will real-time ACH change the landscape in the US? And what do you see as the immediate implications for businesses, banks, and the end consumer?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, the real-time payment network was recently launched down in the US. And there's been a few payment service providers that have gotten access to it. I think the biggest change that we'll see coming out of it is a focus on customer experience, right? So now that organizations can create apps or tools or even embedded widgets into things that accept or send real-time payments, I think the focus will shift from just purely processing payments to building the most consumer-friendly user experience around that payment as either a service or even as a product. So that's probably what we'll see, I think, with real-time payments.
Yeah, for sure. It's going to be a big change. With the drive amongst companies to get loyalty and usage of their mobile apps, the proliferation of stored value in those e-wallets apps is now staggering. For example, Apple Pay and Starbucks. These massive customer dollars also come with no obligation to pay interest or be bound by any regulatory deposit insurance. What do you think the end game is going to be, or will it be the Apple Pays of the world?
Yeah, that one's interesting, right? I mean, I think I could spend a lot of time talking on this one. Like, I really do think that banks and credit unions or financial institutions, lending companies, I mean, money is no longer like a tangible thing. I mean, we see even in the pandemic, right? I mean, there were stores that literally said no longer accepting cash, recommend to pay digital. So I think digital wallets and the use of digital currencies will actually be the future, or we're already starting to see that shift happen. And I think consumers are a lot more open-minded these days around stored value in things like Starbucks or Apple, not because it's any more trustworthy than the cash that's printed by the government, but that they don't think about that trust factor, right? It's Starbucks, so it's totally safe, totally cool to use. It's Apple, it's totally safe, big company, trusted by millions and billions of people. So I think people aren't thinking about the trust aspect. They're just thinking about the utility of it. So.
Yeah. Like today I went to Starbucks, and instead of just paying with my debit card, I just loaded money onto like the Starbucks app, and you get more points for it. So why would you?
Exactly.
And like, I don't even carry my debit card around. I just use like Apple Pay everywhere. It's so convenient.
Yeah. I mean, I used to, carry a big, huge, thick wallet with credit cards, debit cards, loyalty cards. I mean, literally my only thing I carry these days is my mobile phone, right? You can tap, pay, collect your rewards at Starbucks or Tim Hortons, whatever. But yeah, I think people are trusting of the big brands and therefore not even thinking about the safety of their cash.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how like smaller companies compete with that, because you don't always have that trust factor.
For sure.
Situation, yeah. Okay, crypto payments, especially with national regulators, is probably the last sticking point before ubiquitous crypto payments. Recent articles show the addition of an audit system to assist regulators with ATF and AML. Policies would be the last step. What other roadblocks do you see, and if anything, are you or other payment providers doing to be ready to process crypto payments?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, for us, we've generally stayed out of crypto payments directly because of all of the concerns around the regulatory nature of things and also the uncertainty. But I do think the biggest hurdle that's still in the front of it being sort of massively adopted by everybody from young people to old people is probably the ability to transact with those digital currencies without really high fees. So, I mean, right now, if you want to buy, go and buy some Bitcoin or even Dogecoin, as others would say, you're going to spend quite a bit in fees just to make that purchase. There's also the uncertainty of holding it, and then there's the utility of using it. So, I think the biggest hurdle that we can see in the space right now is just driving down the transactional fees and basically getting a lot more retail adoption. And as soon as we see both of those two things occur, I mean, at that point, I think it'll become pretty mainstay way to pay for things or transact value amongst peoples.
Yeah, and it seems like there's so many more cryptocurrencies being created every day. It'd just be interesting to see which ones will actually make their way into like the main space thing.
For sure.
With conversations around the US banks accepting Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, if the same progression was made in Canada soon, how do you see Apaylo fitting in? Kind of similar.
Yeah. I mean, it's a really good question. As I shared earlier, I mean, we've not been directly involved in that space yet. But I think as we do, I mean, Apaylo is primarily a technology company, and we offer basically like a payment technology platform. I could see that that could be layered on as more of the customer experience front end to a lot of the cryptocurrency trading or holding of the digital currency down the road. I also think we could probably be viewed in a bit of the regulatory landscape, but we have a lot of expertise on our team in that space. So I think as it sort of unfolds, probably we'll see Apaylo be a bit more focused on that customer experience front end, as well as supporting some of these organizations with some of the regulatory hurdles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we'll just have to see those like fees drive down with Bitcoin and stuff. Yeah,
for sure.
Apaylo is in some interesting payment spaces for lottery and licensed marijuana merchants. How has your journey been, and what is the future to grow those payment channels for you?
Yeah. I mean, we serve a lot of different industries. Especially here in Canada, we're seeing, I guess, the government recently, I think it was about 3 weeks ago, put a framework around single wager sports betting. And that basically brings the ability for provinces to legalize that. We saw a couple of years ago, as you know, a legalization of marijuana and cannabis. So, I mean, I think for us, as these new industries become regulated, and organizations who aren't experts in the payment space begin to look at ways to sell their products or goods and services online, I mean, that just opens up new channels of business for us. So, I mean, we're certainly open-minded to taking a look at that and building solutions to support new industries as they become regulated. So for us, it's just similar to the pandemic. I mean, we saw a huge shift of organizations moving online, and it just overnight catapulted our business into serving more customers. So
yeah, the pandemic has definitely shifted a lot of consumer behavior, and it's definitely benefited you guys. And it's interesting to see how the competition in the industry unfolds for sure.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm going to stop the recording.